So about 54 years ago, I was bowling with some family in Cleveland and sitting on the lanes trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And for the next few years, I certainly enjoyed bowling, took dates bowling. There was always something fun about it. Ended up in New York, and while that was going on, sorry, let me back up. While that was going on, there was a famous Walt Disney quote that years ago that I'd heard, and the gist is, while there's very little adult in a child, there's a lot of child in every adult. And from a young age, admittedly, I've always just been a kid at heart, and there's just something fun about bowling and something fun about spending time with others, and that was kind of the genesis of frankly starting in the concept. I ended up in New York in the venture capital business, late 80s. I was late 20s at the time, was going to buy a bowling alley on the Upper West Side. It's where Jerry Seinfeld parks his cars now. Didn't do it, had the name Pinstripes in 1988. Bowling pin, pun, pinstripe suit to do an upscale restaurant with bowling. Didn't do it, and for the next 16 years, I was involved in biotechnology and a few other businesses and kept mentioning to friends and family this bowling idea to just kind of redefine the bowling space. I'd seen what Lucky Strike and Brunswick and some others had done for years and thought that we could do something quite different. So 14 years ago, I left the pharmacy business that I started and said, life's too short, let's do it. I contacted Brunswick. I was living in Boulder, Colorado at the time, not far from here. Started commuting back and forth to Chicago. Met the president of Brunswick, who basically told me to do two things. One, he said, fly to Florida, and you need to meet this 84-year-old gentleman named Jim Bennett, who hired Kurt Haars and everybody at Brunswick. Jim had been at Brunswick for about 120 years. And Jim was terrific. Jim had seen everything and had seen a lot of the different concepts, so I spent about a half day with Jim. And then the other thing that Warren at the time said, he said, you got to read this book, Bowling Alone. And this is 20 years ago that the book was written. And the gist of the book, it's a dense book written by a Harvard economist, so I'd recommend not reading it, but read the Cliff Notes. The whole gist of the book is he tracks the decline in PTA meetings. He tracks the decline in voting. And of the 600-page book, there's only 4 pages about bowling, tracking the decline in league bowling. And so the vision always was, as far as what we were going to try to do, was to go back to the future and recreate yet another high-quality environment that people could really connect the way that they did years ago, and frankly, the way that I did when I bowled in Cleveland in leagues and with friends and family. So that was the original vision. Admittedly, I had never been in the restaurant or bowling, certainly gaming business, and so I spent about 2 years putting the pieces together. And one of the key elements was putting the team together. So I think some of you that listened to Chris yesterday, I interviewed 38 general managers. This is 14 years ago, before hiring Chris. I interviewed 36 chefs. I interviewed 34 event planners. And we put together a pretty high-quality team that kind of shaped the whole concept for about 18 months before we opened. And I stumbled on bocce in Los Gatos. I was visiting some friends, and they said, you got to check out this bocce concept. I did, and then we decided to do bocce with bowling and do the duality of Italian-American cuisine, Italian-American food, wine, etc. And so that was the genesis of combining the two. So that's what we did. One of the founders of Maggiano's in the early days joined our board. The former chairman of McDonald's joined our board. So we had a lot of perspective. And we started 11 and a half years ago in Chicago. We've got 8 locations open. We're opening Fort Worth in 2 months. We're opening Cleveland May 17th. We'll open Houston in September. And we're looking at probably 52 sites around the country and having some discussions in Mexico City and internationally. So we're planning to do this in a quite substantial way, but in a measured way. And this is a little small to read, but the gist of what we put together, we put together about 3 months ago. And for quite a while, we were focused on what we were doing. And initially, the what was to redefine the entertainment dining space. And it's been referenced, the soul and kind of why you do something. And we really started spending time, and we stepped back a bit and asked ourselves, why are we really doing this? The why is to just connect. And so what I put together here is on the left hand, call it the y-axis, is connectivity and then tonality. So connectivity, on the bottom of the spectrum is whether it's virtual reality or your iPhone, by way of example, that's much different than a true connection. Tonality is, there's certain concepts that it's not a case of right and wrong. There's certain concepts that sell Red Bull, which we don't, that tend to be a little more edgier at times. We tend to skew on the sophisticated side. So when discussed earlier, what do you want to offer and why? We try to stay pretty true to sophisticated fun. So it's not a disrespect to axe throwing, but we don't have axe throwing. We've resisted curling and ping pong and shuffleboard and a whole lot of other concepts. We've stayed true to bowling and bocce with phenomenal food, scratch kitchen, and then banquets. So we do 2,000 events a year, each location. We do weddings, birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, corporate events, 20-person parties, 1,000-person parties. And admittedly, this was mentioned yesterday in terms of what the trends in the industry, the gist of the sun shining on some of those that are kind of in this spectrum. Amazon is hurting a lot of people. So the JCPenney's and the Sears and frankly Macy's, we're looking at chunks of Neiman Marcus space. We're looking at chunks of Saks Fifth Avenue around the country because all of these mall owners are looking for something very experiential, which everybody's referencing today. And so a lot of different concepts play in that experiential space. And if you play in it the right way, there's some tremendous opportunities. So I just want to flip through and give you just a little flavor, pun intended, of some of, call it our tonality. So our kitchen is just about 100% scratch kitchen. That's our tiramisu that's homemade. We make most of our own pastas. We have the same menu at all our locations. So it's really high quality food. And we're a restaurant with entertainment. We're not a bowling alley with food. Distinction, and admittedly we still suffer from the stereotype that we're a bowling alley and how good can your food be? So it takes a little time sometimes to break that stereotype. This is our latest location in Bethesda that we opened about 3 months ago. So it doesn't look like your typical bowling alley or for that matter bocce venue. This is our front entrance. We do a beautiful stone entrance. This is our bistro. So the look and feel is quite different than, at least stereotypically, what most people might assume. Then the real issue for us was we spent a lot of time refining the concept, and then a number of years ago started saying to ourselves, it's time to scale. And so all that is depicted here is we've got 8 locations open. We're doing 3 in the next 12 months. And we're hoping to do, let's say, 4 to 5 a year, starting in calendar 19. And so let me just give you a little quick flavor as to what we're trying to do in terms of growing now. First of all, the most important component for us to grow is certainly our team. We've got a terrific front of house team led by Chris. We've got an executive chef. We've got an event team. We hired a chief marketing officer 6 months ago. Chris mentioned yesterday we hired a development real estate guy 3 months ago. Rob I've known for about 10 years. Rob headed real estate at Crate & Barrel and Apple, US and internationally. So we've got about 1,000 team members now. And there was another book, I didn't put the copy on the slide here. There's a book that I read about 3 years ago that I'd highly recommend. It's a book called Boys in the Boat. And the gist of the book, it's 1944 University of Washington in Seattle rowing team, college team that goes to the Olympics to compete against the Nazis at the time, and they win. And it's a phenomenal book. And we use that repeatedly at Pinstripes because it's all about rowing. And it's about rowing together as a team. It's not the strongest, the fastest. It's choreographing all the team members, back of house, front of house, events, management team, et cetera. And we only use the word team. So we don't have any employees, we have team members. But it's a really important part that, frankly, is the soul of anything that we do. So to give you a little more flavor, this was our second location. Our early locations, we did 38,000 square feet of interior space, and then we had another 20,000 feet of outdoor space. Fire pit, those are bocce courts outside. This was in South Barrington. Minneapolis, in this case, we inherited 16,000 feet on top of 16. Dave & Buster's tried to do the site. The residents across the pond violently said, we don't want Dave & Buster's. They didn't want us. And we had to make love to the local residents, figuratively, for about 6 months. And we ended up opening this location about 7 years ago. Oak Brook, we built ground up. We did a ground lease with Sears, and then a financial group, a REIT, gave us $8 million, and we built ground up. Georgetown, and I'm giving you just a little flavor of, in some cases we're building ground up, in some cases this is Georgetown. This is Emmon, Wisconsin. We did 20,000 plus 12 with condos above us. We sound attenuated the bowling so that it was a moot point, pun intended. Bethesda, this is our patio space on this second level that's 8,000 feet and some gorgeous views with the fire pit outside. This, we started construction 3 months ago in Cleveland, 20,000 feet with 7,000 feet on the second level with gorgeous patio space. We'll open May 17th. Houston in River Oaks, we took possession last week. We'll start construction in 2 months and look to open in September. San Mateo, this is near San Francisco and Palo Alto. Here's an example, a very successful mall, and they knocked down Sears a year ago, and they're adding ourselves, a high-end theater, 6 other restaurants. Apple's gonna be moving in just below us. Here we're doing 9,000 feet first floor and 21,000 feet on the second floor. And we almost did this in downtown Minneapolis, so it's kind of illustrative. In some cases, we can go into the base of an office building. We've had discussions with Equinox, who's doing hotels around the country. Maybe we would do something creative with them. So in this case, we would do about 14,000 feet on top of 14. I'm disappearing after this presentation. We're meeting some people in Bellevue I-25 in Denver. They have an office building, and they possibly want us to go into the base of the office building. And I think what I'll add as well is in terms of us expanding now, we look at a number of things. One, in general, we look at the overall market. It's a little easy to know nowadays where's Whole Foods or where maybe is Apple or Crate and Barrel in the past or other quality restaurants. That's part of it. The demos, we certainly track all the 1-3-5 mile radius. We track hotel rooms, interestingly. So where there's a lot of hotels, generally there's a lot of high spend on entertainment and dining. So we like hotels, and they certainly like us as well. The co-tenancies are extraordinarily important. So the proxy we use in discussions with developers or brokers of ours around the country, if you're throwing a wedding for your daughter, where do you want 200 people comfortably pulling up to? So we would not do a location next to a Subway or a Buffalo Wild Wings. It doesn't check that box for us. So we need locations and or malls where there's a lot of quality or co-tenants that are somewhat of a like-minded customer, and otherwise we just pass on the location. And then it has to be the right deal. These are expensive to build out. Landlords, it's a little of a buyer's market, so we've had some nice leverage with landlords. I should add that Live Oak Bank, we started banking with about 10 months ago, and they've been terrific as well. We've patiently raised some equity in the past, and so we're growing at a measured pace. but certainly leaning on landlords, which is a critical part of how we've grown. So I'll kind of conclude just with another funny quote. Once upon a time I was a little kid, and we've been having fun with this, and I guess in some respects now I'm just an old dog still learning tricks. This is an image. This was a greeting card that we've debated, frankly, for years whether to use this as a marketing campaign, and Chris and others never really liked the tonality. It was a little too bowling focused. I still love the piece. I tend to prefer to be the dog on the right, not the guy in the dark on the left. So that's it. Thanks all for the time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Appreciate it very much. Thanks a lot.